I am an Offaly man, despite the accent. And I'm going to give you some thoughts on it, or some headlines from the IPCC synthesis report, where I was one of the 6 section facilitators in the entire process. So, first point, climate change since the late 19th century, it's entirely us, not a little bit, all of it. This, unfortunately, is not cumulative greenhouse gas emissions. This is annual greenhouse gas emissions. And yes, they are still heading upwards. This is the wrong way, folks, okay? Increased emissions of greenhouse gases have increased concentrations of greenhouse gases. These concentrations are now at levels unseen in hundreds of thousands to millions of years. We have turned the heating on the climate system up in ways that are entirely unnatural in millions of years. And that has led to a warming. I want to draw your attention to the little grey bar in the middle there. That's the temperature, the highest temperature we believe happened within the current interglacial, the last 10,000 years. Why does that matter? That's the 10,000 years in which we have been able to develop from hunter-gatherers through an agrarian revolution and industrial revolution to today. If you look back much further, that 10,000 years was a remarkably stable period of time. We have lucked out on climate, and we are now pushing the climate beyond that. I want to also draw your attention to the 2 orange bars. One of them is the observed warming, the one on the left. One of them is the attributable warming, that which we know is down to humans. And yes, they're exactly the same. So it's not a little bit of it. It's all of the warming is down to us. And we've continued to warm since the IPCC. 2024 was the first year above 1.5 degrees. According to most observational estimates, and Europe is the fastest warming continent on the planet. Key point number 2 is we are already feeling the effects of climate change, and those least responsible are most vulnerable. So these look a little bit like the world. They are meant to be a pictogram of the world. You want to look at NEU here, which is Northern Europe, where we live. This is heat waves. Red means they're becoming more likely due to humans, and the 3 dots means we have high confidence, which means there are many studies that have consistently linked increases in heat, like we just saw in the last 2 or 3 days, to human activity. So that heat wave was made more likely, more severe due to climate change. I am in no doubt about this. I do not need to wait to perform a study, because there have been so many studies performed that so consistently have concluded that. And the same with extremes of precipitation. Here, the interesting thing is that Northern Europe is the only place in the world in which we again have high confidence, where there are many studies pointing consistently to increases in extreme precipitation occurring in our backyard. And why did I say those most vulnerable are least responsible? Well, this is greenhouse gas emissions per capita on the horizontal axis and vulnerability on the vertical axis. So if you're up on the top left of this, you've done nothing really to contribute to climate change, and yet you're incredibly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. This is by country, but it would be the same within a country. Within Ireland, those most vulnerable, those in places of precarity, are least responsible. They have emitted least. Key point 3, things will get rapidly worse if we do nothing. So this is what the global what would have the hottest day of the year would look like as we warm the climate. 1.5, 2, 3, 4. And what you'll see is the only thing that really changes is the hues, how deep the reds are. You can look at the same with the wettest day of the year and how that changes. And again, the patterns don't really change with additional warming. What happens is that it gets darker. So we add steroids to the climate system. So if you want to know, well, how will climate change in the future? Think about how climate has changed so far and just add to it. So we're already seeing more extreme heavy precipitation events that our farmers are struggling to deal with. We're already seeing more heat waves. That is our future. How much worse it gets is entirely up to us. And it's also increased to impact the severity of impacts on both natural and production systems. So yes, there are some areas that will benefit in terms of, say, agricultural production, but they are massively outweighed by the areas that will see massive harm with future warming. So key point 4 is keeping climate change at 1.5 degrees with minimal or no overshoot really requires everything everywhere all at once. This is the catchphrase we took from the synthesis report. We actually, 3 of us brainstormed this in the cellar of the approval session on the penultimate day. But that really is what it means. This is why things like the decarbonizing zones are so critical, because we need to up our ambition massively. We know what 1.5 and 2 degree worlds look like in terms of the emissions. We must reduce carbon dioxide to net zero to stop warming. We must also, sadly, massively reduce methane and nitrous oxide emissions. They will not reach net zero. They will be balanced by net negative carbon dioxide emissions. But there is no single way as to how we do this. This depends upon our policy choices. Key point 5, before you all jump off a cliff and go, oh my God, is that we have the technologies, tools, and policy instruments to act, and many would return money to our pockets. So I want you to look at the right-hand side here, and this is levelized costs of expenditure out to 2030 for different solutions in different areas, and there is even more of this figure on another slide in other presentations, but I've got to give this in 10 minutes. Blues mean out to 2030, investing in things like wind and solar return money to our pockets. But if you're in a country like Ireland, where we have the emissions trading scheme and the carbon tax, even the yellows and the oranges and even the very start of the reds are net returning money to our pockets. We have a huge range of options across numerous sectors to massively reduce emissions. This is not hopium. This is things that we can do. We need to up the pace. We need to up the ambition. We need to bring the public along. Key point number 6, not acting on climate change makes acting on everything else that matters to us much, much harder. So you might not care about the climate, but you care about education or health or a huge number of the other sustainable development goals that we are aiming to achieve. Now, we can look at whether climate change helps or hinders, and I'm going to show you in the next slide a map of whether each sustainable development goal is aided or hindered by climate change. White means we don't know. There's nothing to assess. Blue means that climate change action helps the achievement of that sustainable development goal, and orange means climate action hinders. So, first thing, a lot of white. There's a lot of things we don't know. But the second thing, where we do know, there is an overwhelming amount of blue in this. So even if you don't care about the climate, if you don't participate in climate action, the things you do care about are going to be that much harder to achieve. We really need to work on this. And key point 7 is climate change is personal to all of us. I always put this figure in an Irish context talk, because this was dreamt up in the basement of a hotel in Dublin in the synthesis report leading with the meeting. It is the most impactful figure from the synthesis report. If you can't see yourself in this, your kids, your grandkids in this, you're not frankly human. Thank you very much. Goodbye.